Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wendy Bond, and I want to thank Annie and the Hair Nerd for having me on today to talk about my NAHA inspiration and why we all do what we do. So one thing is that's kind of a funny antidote is I don't think many people know that most of the time people enter NAHA multiple times before you ever get nominated. So I think this is my 7th entry and my 7th nomination and probably about my 12th entry or 15th entry. So, you know, you do get experience like number 1, entering and not always being a finalist, and number 2, being a finalist, going to the award night and being really excited, but then you have to have that happy for other people face because everyone's sitting around and they're waiting, and then when they don't announce your name, you're like, okay, I'm really okay with this. I'm really okay with this. I really want to cry, but I'm okay with this. But either way, I would say it's something that you're never going to regret. I've been a stylist for over 25 years. I've been an educator. I've owned a salon. I've owned a beauty school. Currently, I'm Director of Education for Lakme USA. You know, my passion is really color. So for me, doing NAHA is something that really gets you out of your rut, whether it's teaching. I still do clients one day, whether it's teaching classes, writing curriculums, and doing my clients one day a week. It gives me the opportunity to just be creative and sort of do the why not be so structured with what I have to do. So what I would say is, for me, it really is one of those things where you can't possibly get what you get when you're working behind the chair all the time. Because working behind the chair is one of those things where, you know, you love your clients, you love what you do, it's how we make a living, and we can be creative, but so many times it's the clock, it's the client in our chair, and then when you're not working, you know, you're tired, you've got your kids, you've got to go home, you do what you do. So I would say that regardless of the nomination, you're going to find that you use the pictures for so many different things. You can use them for your website, use them for your portfolio, and just the experience of, you know, kind of curating. Like for instance, the girl in the upper corner was published in something recently, but this was my inspiration for that, and it was great because I was really able to completely, you know, create the look on my mannequin before I actually did it on the model, and yet it's a really simple color placement. You know, the color is really, there's just big panels of one of our colors called Red Motion, which is a high intensity red mixed with more of a traditional red. So again, now I actually use this technique all the time in my salon. So it's called Red Spotlight. I could use this with natural shades of red. I could use it with, you know, fashion shades. But the idea is my inspiration came from wanting to do a technique, do a photo shoot, and now I have the finished product to share with my clients. So let me just think what else. One thing I would say is that the Hair Nerd's been around a long time. My husband Oscar had told me about Annie years and years ago. I would say that I always think of myself as the quintessential hair nerd because I do like to play with color and swatches. I would say at least every other month you're going to walk into my kitchen on a Saturday night, there'll be like a movie playing, I'll have my wine open, you'll have mannequins all over the house, and you know, I'll be experimenting and playing, and many times my daughter Audrey will do it with me. So one of the things is, you know, having kids is fun because they get you doing things like watercolors, arts and craft projects for school. For me, you know, she is really into arts and crafts, and she's always like destroying the house. So we had done a lot with watercolors, and one of my inspirations for this particular collection was trying to think of when you use watercolors, you actually, you know, use the white paper or the white background that you're painting on to be like a third color, if you almost think of it. So like that white space or whatever color paper, you could do beige, whatever color your watercolor paper is, where you layer the paint, you know, you're going to gradually build your tones. So with watercolor, you can do one wash, you can keep reapplying, keep building, you can blend your colors. So for me, I wanted to kind of do something that was in that kind of fantasy color fashion feel, but not be so rigid. I also think that as hairdressers or colorists, we're obsessed sometimes with coloring every part of the hair. And I was really inspired by the idea of a translucent color, kind of keeping that watercolor feel along with white space. Oops. So white space is something when you think about an ad, like if you think of the Apple icon, you know, the back of a Mac phone, it's just very simple. It could be a white phone with a little silver apple. You know, it's very iconic. You recognize it. The more text you put around something, the busier you make something, sometimes the less you see it. it's the same thing if you think of like a simple Chanel black dress. You know, it's just a bunch of lines. There might even be one solid color, but the elegance, the statement, the simplicity of it is what draws your eye to it. So next time you look at an ad campaign, anything, you'll kind of notice like the less text there is on the page, generally the more your eye draws to what you're trying to get it to. So for me, with this particular collection, I was trying to do hair color in a way where, I mean, all these models have bleached hair, but if they hadn't had bleached hair, I could be using their natural level 7 and going in and hand painting or shading or watercoloring sections of their hair without the need to do every section and without the need to make it a highlight. So when I experimented, I'll show you some of the things I liked and didn't like. You know, starting with this is more like traditional, what you think of like fantasy color melting, and I did some of that uneven application. You're going to see like in some places the color's a little more translucent into heavier, but at the end of the day I felt like it looked a little too much like something I'd already seen, and I also felt like in some situations it was a little too colorful, a little too cartoonish. Now with this mannequin, all I was doing was using this blonde-headed mannequin to practice placement and blending. So again, this is where the hair nerd part of me comes in, that this is an expensive mannequin. You could do 12 different techniques on this mannequin just by doing a quarter panel at a time. So that's the kind of thing you can't do when you're working as easily, and you can't do, you know, necessarily like on a 5-minute break. So for me, it is sometimes getting out of the salon. I know it sounds crazy, whether I have my Manhattan salon or whether I have my school, I find that sometimes staying in that work environment is not a good thing. Do it on your back deck, do it in your kitchen, go out with friends. Then the other thing I think when you're coming up with a collection, especially for something like NAHA, you need people to collaborate with. So I was really fortunate that I have a great friend named Jiwan Yang and Yanni Kroger. They're both stylists, they both helped me with styling the shoot, but they were both honest enough. I would send them pictures of my mannequins. When I had done this, I was texting Yanni pictures, and he was like, too many colors, get it down so that each mannequin only has 2 or 3 colors on it, no more. And I was like, 2 or 3 colors? How am I going to do that? And remember, I was counting the model's hair as one of the colors. So it was like that background, that white bleach and tone was considered one of my colors. This particular picture is probably my favorite out of the collection. What I will say is that, you know, again, and she has a little bit more color. I also, in thinking this collection, wanted similar tones to kind of carry through. So there's that little bit of orange that carries through to the pink, and then there's the pink that carries through to the blue. So for me, you know, whether it's a photo shoot for yourself or whether it's a photo shoot for NAHA, part of having that story or that concept is feeling like there's a tie, there's a reason. You don't have 3 separate girls with 3 separate looks. The clothing ties them together, the makeup ties them together, the texture of the hair ties them together. Again, this was something I'd done on my daughter probably last summer or last spring, where I was first experimenting with that watercolor idea. This is our gloss color from Lakme, and again, she has virgin hair. I didn't, you know, have to pre-lighten any pieces. And where you see that stronger or weaker tone is I did use a more sheer depositing color at the top. I put these bottom pieces in foil, but she was also naturally lighter. So again, everybody jokes like I have hair swatches everywhere. I'm the person who, you know, as I'm doing my own clients, if I want to test something, a lot of times I'll mix up a tone or something, put it on a white swatch really quickly, write down the formula, save it for later, share it with my educators. So for me, you know, especially in this day and age, there's so many tools we can use to kind of keep ourselves motivated, have fun. One of the great tools that I've used for years, and I'm surprised more people don't know about, is Pivot Point makes these amazing swatch kits. We use them in a lot of our Lakme classes. We give them to our Lakme educators. So you have everything from like, you know, above a level 10 down to a level 5, 50% gray. So you can practice all kinds of things. You can purchase these through Pivot Point. You can also buy individual bags of the lightest tone. So again, you know, I use these for all kinds of activities. I use them to display like color conditioners. I use them to practice formulation, color placement, that kind of stuff. So again, I want to show you a little bit of that today. So I think for me, you know, I had this watercolor idea, I practice a lot. I practice a lot with my formulas. I practice on a few different mannequins multiple times. I kept narrowing the tone of the color I wanted to use and also the saturation. So many of these, again, this greenish blue that you see in her hair is just a combination of the yellow and the green mixed together. So you're going to see how that kind of evolves. So I think, again, you know, something like the Professional Beauty Association is so important to our industry. I think that it's one of those things where, you know, it really elevates us. You know, there aren't always things that we can do. You know, it's hard to can't go get a master's degree in hair or something like that. So, you know, you do it, number one, to help get the recognition of your peers, but you also do it for yourself. And like I said, I don't think you'll ever regret doing it. Again, for me, the other funny story about NAHA I love to tell is a good friend of mine named Benny Pollard. So I had been a third-time NAHA nominee, and you know, the first time I thought there were better collections. The second time I thought I had a good chance. This third time I really thought I was going to win. I was in 2 categories, avant-garde and hair color. I truly thought I would win the avant-garde, or at least one of the categories. So it turns out that okay, if you're there for the night, you're having a good time, there's the cocktail hour, everybody's happy, and right, you know, you don't win your category, you stay for the, I personally always stay. Some people get up and leave, and I'm like, what a sore loser. I'm like, I would stay whether I won or not for the whole evening. And Benny happened to win that night. I think it was for Salon Team or something. And I'm leaving the auditorium, and we didn't really know each other that well at the time, and this is quite a while ago. And I'm walking out, and he grabs me, and he goes, hey, I gotta tell you something. I'm like, what? He goes, I loved your collection. He's like, you gotta keep doing this until you win. I go, you know, I don't know, you know, this is my 3rd time. He goes, no, you gotta understand, I heard like 6 times before I won. It's so worth it. And I think this was probably a second NAHA for him. So I think, you know, we all have reasons we go to work, like to make money, or because it's what we do, or because we love what we do. But when you do something just for the sake of doing it for yourself, it's really fun. And there isn't one single thing that I've done on my mannequins that I haven't been able to bring back to the salon. So I think that's the other benefit to taking that time and money. So again, one thing that's really simple, when you're thinking about, before you start to work with any kind of placement or real person or mannequin, if you're trying to come up with some different creative ideas, just for your own inspiration, don't feel like you're limited to using, you know, actual hair color and hair. Many times when I would be working with students, I would talk about how, you know, if you're trying to teach color formulation, you can literally take like green construction paper and, you know, like a yellow marker, and you'll draw on it, you'll see that it makes, you know, it makes a neutral color, or it makes it, or an orange on top of green. So it's just, there's many different ways you can do this. So almost for like what you would have seen me practicing for this is I would have started out with like a stronger blue. And then depending on how much I decide to fade that blue or not fade that blue, I can keep reapplying. And then depending on if I want to get almost back to having no color on my brush, I can just gradually kind of like fan a little bit of this out. So now I've actually created, and you can do this on hair. I mean, again, hair's moves. So whatever you do on hair, you're going to think it's going to be very static, but it's not going to be once the hair is dry. So again, I have one shade of blue, but it goes from being much darker to much sheerer, and you could do that just by fanning your color out. Same thing of like, when you start to take your other colors and sort of mix them in, if I want to go from like a darker, or like a sheerer yellow, and I can get this kind of uneven coverage where like I'm sort of deliberately leaving some of that white space that we talked about. And then just for fun, as I start to overlap my tones, that's where you're going to get that greenish blue. And that's exactly what I did with my first model. But the hardest thing for me, and I'm even having a hard time doing it now, is to not want to fill all this in. You know, to go from the very sheer, to leave these gaps in between. is always kind of what's harder for me. I don't know, I just get to where I want to start coloring everything, and then I fill it in, and next thing you know, it looks like, you know, I just have like a rainbow. The idea with me in this particular collection was, again, she could be a natural level 7. I'm going to demonstrate on a mannequin. I take 2 to 3 panels back to back. Natural level 7, I could be using a 7 copper and just brushing or watercoloring or hand painting some of my tone like directly on top. And deliberately leaving where the hair's colored, natural, colored, natural, colored, natural. If I had natural level 7 in the same foil or swatch, and just lightly blending the two together. So the idea is I'm not trying to completely merge them, I'm just letting them meet up in a certain place or two. The other part of what gave me that watercolor feel is that I chose to use permanent hair color and create a very fashion or fantasy color. Now I know that the big trend has been to use direct dyes, and this is why I'm such a big nerd, because when you think about it, a direct dye is a stain. It stays on contact. It stains on contact. I think of direct dyes as like paint. Like once they're there, they're there. You can't really move them around. They're very concentrated. You can maybe add white, but there's not a lot you can do with it. With a watercolor, you know, you have that ability to, again, build, layer your tone, get a different level of sheerness. Direct dyes are amazing, but everyone's had that experience where you put it on the hair and you're like, oh my God, it's too dark. Or, oh my God, there's a lot of saturation in this one place. Or my goal is to make it even. My goal wasn't to make it even. It was to get this very ebb and flow kind of fade. We have amazing fantasy colors, and we also have a clear, which I love. So a lot of my color was, all these colors were used either creating, this yellow was like this bright, bright yellow mixed with our clear. The pink that you see was this cool red, it's a 9.5. With a clear. And then I also love, in chroma, we have the most amazing blue. And when you shear this out, when you add clear to it, it becomes like a cobalt blue. So I could go from dark navy to cobalt to sky blue by just adding more clear or 00 to my product. But I also have to remember it's how much I saturate the hair. So if I don't saturate, if I can take that same sky blue, the more I layer it on, the deeper it's going to get. Do I just want to give it a little swipe? So I'm going to go ahead and show you, I've got these papers here, which I actually really like. They're highlight wraps. We happen to sell them through De Pasquale Salon Systems, but it's so funny, again, these are the best wraps. They're made by somebody called Raisin, but anyways, they're really great wraps. They come in different lengths. They're matte on one side, shiny on the other. You put the color on the matte side down, and you know, you can use them for, I use them actually for balayage, just like lay a paper on top, but you can also fold them up and they stick really well. So again, I like, for this particular project, I really liked working on the white rather than the foil because it helps you visualize. Just sort of like gives you a nice clean background to work on. The other thing I was going to say is that getting back to the direct dye versus oxidative dyes, direct dyes are so hard to remove. You know, we've all had that experience where, you know, somebody has a direct dye in their hair, now they're tired, but they want to take it out. So when you take a permanent dye molecule and you use a low volume developer, so I have our chroma blue with our gloss clear, or 000. I used a 6 volume developer, which is our lowest developer. I let this sit for like 45 minutes. We've now gotten rid of all our lift and we have just a deposit only color pretty much. What's going to happen is, because, and chroma happens to be ammonia free, our gloss is ammonia free, our Planche isn't, but the point is everything's pretty much dissipated. The benefit too to using permanent color in this way is now I get that same effect that I get with direct dyes where I can actually see what I'm doing. So again, just really simple. This particular blue has more blue. This one has more clear. So I mixed up 2 different bowls. One has a lot more clear, like literally like a 5 to 1, like 5 parts clear to 1 part blue. This is more of an equal parts. And I probably should be wearing gloves, but we'll see if I break down and put them on or not. So I'm going to take my 2 different blonde swatches. I'll just get a little color on. You know, when you're using a swatch, I'm going to fan it out just because it's a little easier for you guys to see it. On my mannequin, when I demo the next part, I won't necessarily do that. it'll take a minute or two for this to start to develop, but this is a permanent dye, but you can see because I've let it sit, I'm getting my deposit right away. This one you're going to see right away is much more sheer. It's where I did like the 5-to-1 with the clear. So now this is a much more intense yellow. I pretty much did the same thing. Yellow, this is a really fun color. We have a gold, we have a yellow. This is called the 31. It's like an intense yellow. It's crazy beautiful. I mean, you're not going to add it to a regular person's hair every day, but it's just a gorgeous bright yellow. I took the same yellow and just diluted it with my clear. And now I'm just going to do a little bit of my finger painting, and I'll start to develop my green. Now, instead of feeling like I have to put green on the whole swatch, I can just kind of go in and edge it out where I want to. And what's nice is from the second you start doing this on your model swatch or on your mannequin or whatever you're doing this on, you're going to start to see your colors develop, and it's going to kind of help give you that roadmap. And again, I want to try to leave a little bit of white. In this case, I'll just take the lighter yellow on the darker blue and see what we get. Again, this one has a little more blue in it. So, and this is a sheerer yellow. So on this side, I've got the yellow that's much more translucent. In this side, if you watch, and I really like even when I was doing the model's hair, I would apply the color. I'll show you on my mannequin. I'll apply the color. I'd work it in and just kind of, in some spots, you're almost adding like dabs of color and fanning it out. So as you sort of see the color developing, this is more of a green-blue, this is more of a yellow-green, and this is more of that true blue and sky blue. So again, it's a really wonderful process. Now, if I had tried to do that with a direct dye, I would have a lot less leeway. I'm not saying you couldn't do it, but I feel like you don't get that sense to kind of blend and sheer and play as much. Sometimes your one tone can take over. You know, same things with the pinks or the yellows, you know, however you want to go ahead and do it. It's just a really fun way to start to sort of work with the color and kind of get your inspiration. I'm going to go back to my yellow. So any of this I was doing like prior to doing my photo shoot, I was doing this just to kind of experiment with the techniques, like how I wanted the color to read. In this case, I'm using the sheer yellow. I'm going to fan it out. Now, as I work on the mannequin, I would do the same thing. I would smooth that section out, and this time maybe I'll just add a dash of pink. And then once I get that pink on there, now I can kind of blend it out and just keep working it into the hair and marry it in a little bit. But you can see how forgiving this is, and it really does allow me just to create this really graceful, beautiful tone. And it looks really static now, and you're going to be like, oh, that looks kind of scary. Is it going to be all blotchy? But you know, remember, hair moves. So now it's very static. This is the strongest it's going to be. When we rinse that out, that hair will have much more of like this kind of feeling, like that kind of uneven saturation that I got. Because, you know, again, we're taking a fairly thick section. I'm applying almost like dabs of color. Like I put one color down, put dabs of color in, and then kind of blended it out. And then the other color that I'm crazy about is we have just a couple of our really beautiful pinks. Again, I have my more intense pink and my more sheer pink. This is our Red Motion 9.5 along with clear, but again, this is like equal parts clear and Red Motion. This is that that sort of 5-to-1. So what's fun in this instance is, again, and this is just a small surface, is start by maybe doing my baby pink on top. And we definitely have these formulas if you ever want to, can email me later. I was inspired by names like I did like Bubblegum, Jolly Rancher, you know, I was trying to Starburst, like I was thinking of Starburst as being the kind of pastels, more matte tones, and the Jolly Ranchers as being the more vivid. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my more intense pink. So again, it's just a very fun way to work. And I think rather than doing like, again, you know, huge sections, as this color oxidizes, we'll let it sit. You're going to see these really nice tones kind of come out. I could go back with just like a dot of my orange or something. So this process really helped me decide what formulas I wanted to do and to like narrow the choices down. Because, like I said, my one friend Yanni was like, it looks like a clown. You have too many colors. I'm like, okay, I have too many colors. I think part of being creative is I have to collaborate. I love collaborating with people, but you also have to listen to their suggestions. Like, don't you love the creative people that ask for tons of suggestions and then they never take anybody's advice? And then when they're done, they're like, well, that didn't work out. And I'm like, I told you it wasn't going to work out. So again, it's really good. You know, I love, you know, I'm very fortunate in that I have a lot of friends in the industry that have just always been really good to me. Okay, so that's that. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start my little mannequin section. I'll just show you a couple more things. This particular mannequin, like I had said earlier, this one I was really, not that I was not happy with, but this just to me looked kind of ordinary. You know, and even though I had some really success with like here, where I got it to go from like very vivid to very soft, I did get some of that white showing through that I was looking for. It almost looked like a mistake. I'm like, that doesn't look right. That looks like I just didn't apply the color evenly. So I'm like, okay, I have to get more white, more white. I have to get a sheer application. So that was my goal. In this case, same type of thing. I started with that sheer application. I had done a darker blue into that yellow green, and then I dabbed some of the blue on to kind of create that sort of like seafoam color. But in the end, I still felt like maybe it looked like a mistake. Here I had used one of our silvers in Lakme with our blue. This is our silver lines. But again, didn't then I want, and again, like where the color falls and how it falls. Same thing here. I was pretty happy with this, but I wasn't completely happy with the tones. So same thing, these last two sections I showed you, the yellow and this pinkish blue, you can see where I had applied the pink in places and then just kind of like smudged it out. So what I'm going to do, because I'm very frugal, is I'm going to use this last section on this mannequin because she has a lot of life left in her. I'm always like, why would we waste all this hair? And I think that's kind of a natural mistake. Like a lot of times we start out thinking we have to do an entire look, like to see if something works. I think whether it's an updo or something like a color technique, you know, you could probably do like just the front and see if you like where it's going, or do a quick version and then do your long version, your more in-depth version. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I've got my section out. I'm going to go ahead and take more of like an opaque slice. So this is thicker than what you would use for a highlight, and I'm okay with that because I don't need it to be super sheer because I was kind of going for that watercolor kind of smudgy feel. I'm going to go ahead and just lay my paper down. I just wanted to kind of keep everything in here today. I mean, I could be doing this in the studio, but it just seemed like simple to do it like this. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, I've got my sheer blue, my intense blue, and I'll use a little bit of my yellow probably. So I'm going to go ahead and put down some of the sheer first, knowing that I'm going to end up going back over this as well. So again, it's very simple. I mean, you could call this hair painting, you could call it balayage, you could call it whatever you want. I'm sort of walking some of this color up. And I don't think you have to worry about being ultra perfect. I mean, sometimes even doing something like this, where I'm just dabbing some of the color on, was a lot of what I did on that top model. So now I will go back with my more intense blue and just kind of focus on a couple pieces. So now you almost think of that as like, I'm just adding a little bit more pop. You know, now I'm going to get my yellow. The one thing I will say is when you're doing this in a real person, you're going to have a couple brushes for each shade so that you can clean your brush as needed or swap your brushes out. I definitely don't mind if a little bit of the same color gets on the brush, but you know, there's times where you're going to get too much and you're going to want to go back and clean it off, or at least have a towel to wipe it off. So again, on this part, I kind of made almost like that intentional bump in the hair or smudge. Now I'm just going to go through and just go ahead and break it up. And I'm adding my yellow over the more pastel blue, and then when I add my yellow, maybe I'll grab my intense yellow and just put a few more. This is going to give me more of that intense green, kind of tie the two of them together. So when I did my different mannequins, depending on who it was, and again, it doesn't bother me that that one section is kind of uncovered, because I know that with different ones, I got more sheerness or less sheerness. I will say that when you're doing this, this one has quite a lot of color. So on my next application, I'll probably do similar tones, but I'm going to do a lot less. I'm going to leave more of that white space that we talked about. So again, I'm going to use the same tones for now that I used. And I would recommend, you know, either taking, depending on, you know, sometimes you don't even need foil or separation. It's kind of up to you. Depends how much of the model's hair you're probably doing. But kind of like if you think like, if you do one strong saturation, and then you go into one sheer, and then another sheer, and then maybe another strong, that's what gives you that very nice kind of almost like kind of luminescent quality to it. So again, I just said I put a lot of color on that previous section. So with this one, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab a new brush just for a second. I'm going to go ahead and use my yellow first. And maybe I'll start at the top. You know how the last one had a lot of saturation at the bottom? So it's not even just how much I'm saturating, but where you're starting. And what's really nice is like you can literally almost go through and like deliberately like miss pieces. Now, like I said, I mean, I know I'm doing this on crazy light hair, but you could be doing this on somebody, like I said, I mean, natural level 8 hair, and you could be going through like an 8 gold or an 8 copper or something just to go ahead and add this like glimmer shimmer into the hair. You know, you'd be using like maybe a 10 volume developer or a gloss type of product, because again, you're not trying to lift her, you're just trying to enhance and add that kind of movement and shift in tone. I'm going to go ahead and use my lighter blue, my more pastel-y one next. And here I'm just going to blend the two a little bit more. And then that's all I need to do for this one. So again, I will close this up. And like I said, as far as how deep the sections are, I wouldn't worry about, you know, you definitely don't want them too sheer. You want them more opaque, because we're almost kind of trying to create a very graphic placement. And then once we have that really graphic placement, you're going to remember that the hair moves, and that we're kind of trying to go for this uneven saturation, or this kind of glimmer. So now I have a clean brush, and I'm just kind of smudging that blue out to give me like a softer finish. Just going to lightly go in with my pink. And again, I'm only just using a tiny amount of pressure. I'm only just kind of dabbing it on. It was almost like, I can remember when I was doing it, and if I hadn't practiced it so much, I would have probably been a nervous wreck. Because I was like, oh my God, this is going to create all these blobs and dots in the hair. But in the end, it really didn't. You know what I mean? It was very, very, you know, kind of user-friendly, and they just came out very soft. So last, I'm just going back and doing these. I think the main thing is that, you know, if you notice, I'm not leaving any natural sections in between. So that's the one thing I would say that all these looks has is there were different levels of saturation. Maybe the bottom one, the very exception, might have just yellow on it, not 2 colors. But I'm just trying to, you know, again, show that uneven saturation and that kind of buildup of color. So, I think that, you know, we've kind of covered a lot today. I think that one thing about trying to decide if you're going to do NAHA or not would be that, you know, when you look at other people's work, you know, go on and click through and go back over the years, like go back years and years and look, and you'll just be inspired by so many things. I know that one of the things that inspired me most was the student category this year. I mean, there's some incredible work. So again, if you think it's a price thing, you'd really be surprised. And I know that you won't regret doing it, and I think making time to play outside of the salon is extremely important. And I think for me, sometimes I get my best ideas of like either taking something like a watercolor and deciding how I'm going to apply that to hair, or when people ask you those questions like, can you do this? And you're like, oh, I can't do that. And you're like, why can't I do that? So again, just look at what's around you, get your inspiration from that. Look at what people are doing in the industry, but also look outside the industry. You know, look at design in other fields and texture and application and how colors play and live together, and I think hopefully that will give you something to work at. Thanks everybody for having me on and tuning in today. I really feel honored to be a finalist again for NAHA, and again I think PBA does a wonderful job and it's a great night, so I hope that I see some of you guys there. Thanks a lot.